You bring the energy, he'll do the rest. Martinez and Company, powered by Sports Radio 102.9 The Game.
You're going to hear it right here.
The show starts now.
All right, good morning to everyone out there in Radio Land, wherever you may reside, Vegas, California, Arizona, everywhere, overseas in India, Turkey, Pakistan, our fine men and women in our United States military. May God continue to bless you, and thank you for protecting our country along with our local law enforcement. Thank you guys, girls, also for protecting our community as well. I am Angel Martinez. You are listening to Martinez Company here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. We do appreciate everyone who downloads the app. And if you guys can see right up there across the screen, SR1029thegame.com is where you can download the app. You can go directly to the website. I'll bring it up here momentarily. But you can go there and download the app. Therefore, you won't miss a show. And if you're working out, as I mentioned over on the Pete Shepard Show, when you can start your day off with Pete in the morning from 7 to 10 a.m., you can go to, let's just say you're at home and you're doing a little mini workout before you go work out at the gym. Watch the live video right on the app. And then when you jump in your car, whether it's the Android Play or the CarPlay, pop it over to the radio side of Digital Sports Radio, which is always available for you guys. Pop it in there. You can listen on to the show while you get to wherever you're working out. And then once you get to the gym, you want to bring the video back up, you can switch over from the radio version back to the live video version of it. So we thank you guys again for supporting the show. Thank you all who tuned in this morning to the Pete Shepard Show. And then later on this afternoon will be my hermano, Rich Quinones, The Drive with Q from 3 to 5 p.m. All right, on the show today, as it's going to be a busy show. Of course, we are live till 12 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hopefully, we'll get back to the 5 days a week, but because there is a lot that has to be done, as Pete mentions in the morning, that I have to take care of, it makes it pretty hard for me to go 5 days a week. But hopefully, that'll be coming back here soon. Tomorrow, the Tampa Bay Sun Football Club will try to get their first win of the season. Last week on the season opener, it was an absolute fantastic crowd, a sellout crowd, 5,000 on hand. Last week with the Tampa Bay Sun Football Club, they drew a draw, and Coach Brown, after the game, the post-game conference, had tons of great energy, and everybody was very uplifted, and they wanted to see exactly how this team was going to end up playing. And they played well on the pitch. The match itself ended up drawing a 1-1 draw. So this week, it's DC that they're hosting Saturday night. If you guys have not gotten your tickets, or ladies, please do so. Visit TampaBaySunFC.com. And you can also go to our website, SR1029thegame.com, and you can click right on the link there that you see on the homepage. So it'll take you right out to the Tampa Bay Sun Football Club, as we are covering on the media side all season long for them as well. And along with the men last night for the USF men's team, the soccer club, end up losing their first match of the season, 4-1. I expected a little bit better, I'm pretty sure, for themselves and the team to be able to come out there and get that first win. But as we've seen with the women, sometimes you don't have to win the first game and do like the women have done and won the next 2 games in a row. As far as the USF women, Coach Chris Brown, and as I called her yesterday, and you guys will end up hearing it today as well, is Senorita Galak, who is the goalkeeper. You guys will be able to hear that interview as well, coming up here at the 11 o'clock hour. I had a good conversation with her and Coach yesterday, as we talked about what we're going to be talking about today on the show. But it was a good time, and as I mentioned to Coach Brown, sometimes you want that first win, that first elusive win to start off the season. But they had a tough match against FSU. FSU, of course, ended up winning that game 5-0. But since then, it's been 10 goals for the USF women's soccer team. And they scored 10, only allowed 1 goal to skate by. After starting out the season 0-1, they've now gone on a 2-game win streak. Next game coming up next week for the ladies. I know they have some time here. I believe today is a down day or a down time off, meaning they get some time off. So away from the pitch, and to being able to relax a little bit, as it is hot and steamy out here in Florida. For those who don't know, if you've never visited down here during the summertime, it is a squelching heat. I can compare it to, because my lovely producer and I have been out to Vegas many a times, and when we usually get off the plane in Vegas, it's about 110, 109 degrees. The difference is it's the desert heat versus the humidity. But if you live here in Florida and reside in Florida and you go to Vegas, it really doesn't make a difference, because it's funny how the folks from Vegas will come here and say, oh my God, this is ungodly ridiculous here in Florida. But it's because of humidity. Everybody knows this. Up until about October, we'll be in the 90s, and then all of a sudden get into the 80s, and it'll remain in the 80s till just about March. And we'll get into some 70s, maybe early February, and then we're right back into extreme heat again. So summer storms, all that stuff that happens here in Florida, I wouldn't have it any other way. So also, Larry Schechter is going to be on with us at the bottom of the hour with his book, author of The History of Fantasy Sports and the Stories of the People Who Made It Happen. It's an interesting read. And for those who love fantasy football, the history behind and the time that he had taken to put this book together, I would applaud him even before he comes on, because there was a lot of resources, a lot of people that he had to not only hear the story from firsthand and then go back to see if what he was being told was either conflicting truth or something else. So there was just a lot of stuff to uncover in a book. It would be a great time, Larry. Honestly, I don't even know if a half hour is going to be able to do justice with everything that goes on in his book. So Larry will be back with us as obviously the season continues with the NFL. Speaking of, at 10:15, we'll get the weekly report from Gas Pump Guy on his Bucs report, as the Bucs are seeming to move in the right direction here. Last preseason game will be coming up, and then after that, like everyone else, this is the last weekend for everyone. And for Chicago Bears fans, I would love to hear from you guys as well, because the Bears went 3-0 during the preseason. Now, you guys have also heard me talk about Coach Eberflus. Could it be that maybe Justin Fields, maybe it wasn't the right guy? Caleb Williams, we're all, at week one, we'll all see, all bets are off when the actual regular season starts. But I want to know how Chicago Bears fans feel. Now, I know how my producer feels, because like everyone else, it's preseason. It means absolutely nothing. I've seen it before at my own Philadelphia Eagles. They've won, when it used to be 4 games that are preseason, it went 4-0, and then the season didn't work out so well. Not saying that's going to happen with the Bears, so Bears fans relax. I'm not saying anything about that whatsoever, but I just would love to know the reaction of the folks out there in Chicagoland to see how these Bears are going to do. I think looking at what Eberflus has done so far, and also the injury to Coleman, I'm going to bring up that one in case you guys missed it. I was able to find it via the public domain. So I want you guys to see it. And it's weird because, again, it's slowed down for you guys to be able to see it. But the difference is when you see the hit, it looks just like in every ordinary hit that we've seen guys do in the NFL. But thankfully, they said that he was at least moving his arms. He was moving his extremities, gave him a thumbs up before he was carted off the field. So hopefully for the Bears, no one wants to get injured. You guys hear me talking about this as well. Way before even they report to camp, no one wants to see any players going down, any athlete for that matter. But it happens. Injuries happen. I think a lot of it that happens during camp is a lot of hydration issues. So make sure you always stay hydrated. That's the most important thing, especially here in Florida with a lot of the high school teams here locally, that they always tell you to hydrate. One thing in the military as well, we would hear, drink water, stay hydrated all the time. And that's important, especially when you're working out. And if you decide, I know there's a lot of people who love to run. A lot of people love to exercise. God bless, because we all want to stay physically fit at one point or another. But also remember, too, the hottest time of the day that you don't want to be out there, because we've seen many people collapse while they're out there running in the heat of the day. If you do it, try to do it just before sun up. You can do it at dawn or you can do it at dusk. Either way. Therefore, at least you're not exerting your body more than it's supposed to. And I know Coach Brown with USF, he tries to make sure his athletes stay hydrated and make sure that they are able to switch position players throughout the match. Therefore, at least they don't get the cramps like we saw in game 1, match 1, the same way we saw it with the Tampa Bay Sun, as they end up taking a 3-minute break in the home opener, because for the same thing, they want to make sure that the athletes remain hydrated. And that's super, super important no matter who you are. Even if I know a lot of people may not like drink water. I myself love coffee. I love water. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love it. That's my favorite go-to all the time. But just make sure you stay hydrated one way or the other. Also, some NASCAR news, as well as Dale Earnhardt Jr. had talked about Denny Hamlin's massive penalty whether you agree with it, whether you don't agree with it, it's one way or the other. I know Dylan is making his way up to Daytona as he will be there for Daytona weekend. And Rick Marcus throughout the gate says, I prefer to stay in the AC when it's hot on the tarmac, but that wouldn't go over too well with my superiors. Yeah, I bet. Rick Marcus, who does an outstanding job for Southwest. And listen, God bless, that tarmac is not the most comfortable thing, especially here in Florida. When I jumped out of airplanes out of North Carolina, I will tell you in the summertime, when it got hot and you're carrying that rucksack in between your legs and you're doing that penguin water walk over to the C-130 or C-141, depending on which one you're going to jump out of that day, you can forget about it. It was miserable, miserable, miserable. So 11 o'clock, we'll have the coach on, our goalkeeper on from USF. Don't forget, you guys also give the USF teams likes and follows. And if you guys can, just from me, if you guys can retweet or repost, I'm sorry, because I always think of, listen, I know people say that you shouldn't refer to Twitter anymore as Twitter. If it's X, make it X. A lot of us are just used to saying Twitter. So, but if you see the post up there from the USF women's soccer team, the same way with the men, repost it. They would appreciate it, just like we appreciate here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, anytime we put a post out there, because we're just here to make sure that we can entertain you guys here on the Digital Sports Network and provide as best entertainment as we possibly can. So Larry Schechter joined me here at the bottom of the hour. And again, the USF women's soccer team at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock. But thank you all for tuning in once again to Martinez and Company. And I want to bring up one other thing before I bring up the Coleman video as well. There are some things in this world, but I say this because it is absolutely scary what's out there today. What you guys are going to see when I bring it up here momentarily is a gentleman sitting, and for those who are not watching because you're listening in on the radio, there's a gentleman sitting at a desk. There's going to be another gentleman as soon as I play the video that you guys will see coming up on your right. Now, these folks, right, this is how bots, and the reason why Elon is trying to do the best he possibly can to get rid of that stuff, because you'll see in your feed, and I'm pretty sure everyone on Twitter and on X, you'll see in your feed, all of a sudden you'll get all these people that have nothing to do with anything, and you just put their information out there. But I want to show this here before Gas Pump Guy calls in, how crazy and insane it is. And when you have followers, hopefully you have physical people, like people that you want to like. There's going to be people who are going to follow you, whether it's, for political reasons, sports, arts, hobbies, you name it. But this is scary because when you look at it, this is a lot of places. And if you look to the left here, if you're looking on the screen, there's a window that's there. But watch as I play this video, how much information is pushed out there. And a lot of this information is stuff that people can just scrub, put out there. And it's dangerous to me. So watch this video here. Now I'm going to pause it there for a second because what you guys are seeing is there's a lot more loaded cell phones next to this guy. There's got to be at least, I'm looking at about 10 more to his left, and he's got another screen that's going to come up on the right-hand side, but you must have at least about 100 cell phones up on the wall, and all they're doing is spitting out bot information. So when you guys are getting texts, and I'm pretty sure everyone is well aware of, when you're getting that phone you want from your bank, the phone you want from, you got a package that came versus, UPS, your daughter was kidnapped somewhere in the world, and you know that your daughter or your son is where they're supposed to be. Just be careful. I just raise this awareness because now, as we're coming up on a lot of things here towards the end of the year, and even as the year progresses, just be careful because there's a lot of folks out there that are not in your best interest. If you're going to follow someone, if you need to vet them. If not, just make sure that you are following someone that is human, because the bots are out there and that's all they do. They push. And God forbid you look something on your cell phone, the minute you look at one little thing, it's like they grab it and off they go. So just be careful when you're out there. The other thing that I want to show as well, I'm going to switch back to me here for a second because I want to show you the Coleman injury. Again, it's not super squeamish, so I'm not going to show something where obviously it's ripping a part of the body out or anything else like that. But again, this was just what looks like a normal hit, a normal contact hit, and then just out of nowhere, the injury came, but thankfully for Coleman, he is moving around. So here is the play that injured Coleman last night from the Bears. And it shows first tackle, and then Coleman comes in, and it looks just like his neck and his shoulder end up catching the side on the tackle there. And he lays there momentarily on his side. But again, it didn't look like anything major. We've seen hits like this over and over again. But this one in particular, I don't know exactly what ended up happening, how it ended up happening, but thankfully he is moving around. He was carted off. A lot of his teammates were nearby to make sure that they, not only obviously the fans, but to give him the round of applause to know that he was going to be okay. But it was a scary situation nonetheless. Thankfully, he is just fine. He's going to be okay. And we hope that come we get the report hopefully a little bit later on, we'll be able to hear that he's walked around, that he's just fine, because this can happen in any situation. We've seen the first match, both on FSU and USF side, where the athletes collided with each other. Thankfully, no major injuries, but it does happen. I think the only one that I saw was number 10, where she got cut in her forearm on the backside, where she ended up getting some care taken care of to make sure she get back in the game. But again, just be careful when you're out there as you're playing for a team or watching our athletes out there. Other than staying hydrated, it's hopefully we don't have accidents like this as the season progresses. But I want to get back to here with NASCAR and also Dave Canales, as I hear possibly Gas Pump Guy calling in for his weekly update here. So I will stop myself from talking about the Chiefs update here momentarily, as we do have, I believe, Gas Pump Guy in for his local and his weekly Bucks Report. Gas Pump Guy, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you, Angel?
I'm doing just fine. Hopefully you're staying cool. I know you work your full-time outside. I would say 90% of your day is in the heat, but hopefully you're getting somewhat of a break, at least for a little bit.
Well, that's the good thing about calling in during the day. I can just hop in the truck real quick and turn it on and get the AC going, get at least 15, 20 minutes of some air.
It's always a good thing, because it's tough. I've worked outside for a majority of my life. I've worked outside, minus after high school, but so I know what the heat can do to you. So we got some good action coming from the Bucks. Final preseason game coming up, which I'm pretty sure you're going to touch up on it. But what can you let us know as far as what has happened from between last preseason game and also throughout the week at training camp?
Well, first, I just want to point out Jake Camarda, with the new rule change and stuff about dropping it in the landing zone or whatever. The coaches are saying he seemed to be doing pretty well at dropping it in the ball in the zone on the kickoff. So that's a plus. So I think this rule change may be for the better. I mean, I know they did it so that we'll have some more run backs or whatever and kind of cut back on the injuries. So I kind of like it. It's been doing all right so far, but as the season goes on, we'll see what happens.
Now we haven't seen any, thankfully, no major injuries yet from Bucks training camp, and we all know, just like you're a little bit further south than where we are, but it's been hot. Seems like so far, Todd Bowles has been doing a great job with these guys to keep them stretched, make sure that they're working out at various times of the day. He tries to switch it from inside to outside, rightfully so, because again, big thing is we're trying to do is keep away from any injuries. Baker Mayfield, do you think, or at least do you believe, he'll get any play time for the final preseason warm-up?
Well, from what Coach Bowles said Monday, he said some of the starters were going to play. I don't know how, maybe one or two series, just depending. I don't think Baker needs to play. I'm sure he wants to play as all the other starters want to, but I do believe we'll see a little bit of them, but probably not much.
All right. So it's a final preseason game. We know that a lot of teams, my Eagles included, are trying to at least let the guys come in maybe for a series of play. They won't be in there for too long, just like you had said there. Because again, it comes up to the regular season. The last thing that we wanted to see injuries last year, we saw when Aaron Rodgers went down for the New York Jets. The first game out of the gate, and then you look at the Jets as well as we get back to Tampa Bay here in a second. But you look at the New York Jets, and he says he's ready for San Francisco. San Francisco's defense is pretty tough. He's coming off an injury, and you're playing away week 1 in the NFL. Do you, just in your opinion, I know we're not talking about the Bucs here, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers out of the Jets. Do you think he stays healthy for this week 1 coming still? I mean, we've heard he's 100% healthy, that his injury is 100% healed, but you're going against a prime defense against the 49ers.
Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers is up for a big test when he goes up against the 49ers. Their defense is crazy good. The good thing about the Jets, though, is they seem to beefed up their offensive line a little bit, so maybe he'll have a little more protection. I think that's what the problem was last year, because even when Zach Wilson, I believe, was the one that was there before, that offensive line was just horrendous. He was always running for his life, you know what I mean? And if they can do a good job blocking, I believe he'll be all right. He's not much of a run. I mean, he runs, but he'd prefer to drop back and throw the ball. But I just think he'll have to be a little cautious in the first couple games and just make sure he's 100% good and ready to go, because that's the last thing they want is for him to go down again and then another wasted year.
Now, getting back here to the Bucs for a second, Mike Evans has been pretty quiet during the preseason and during the camp as well, which, again, we hope for all these guys to stay nice and healthy. What are the expectations? And we know he may get a little bit of play time, but as we're leading up to week 1 in the NFL, what do you think? Let's take the first just 2 games. What is the expectation out of Evans? And I'm just talking about, yards here, just the first 2. We won't go into the entire season because we'll evaluate it after week 2 and see what your thoughts are. What do you think his numbers will look like the first 2 weeks of the regular NFL season?
I think Mike Evans will get his touches, but again, we have a lot of good receivers, and I think they're gonna spread it around a little more, and I think that Mike Evans he'll probably get his numbers, but like I said, I think they're going to end up spreading it out more and get Godwin in there and Tompkins in there and just go ham is what they say.
It's all right. I'm everybody knows this. I'm not a Bucs fan per se, but I live here in Tampa, so I end up watching and seeing what the team is doing. Again, Todd Bowles, which it's just my opinion. We'll see if it's going to be a make or break it season. I think if Tampa Bay has a very slow start, I think if you're looking at 0-3, 1-4, there's going to be a lot of talk. Is Todd Bowles the future here of the Bucs? Now, I don't think they will let him go. Even if they start out, again, hypotheticals, we like to throw them around every once around here, but 1-3, I don't think the Bucs will let him go during especially during the early part of the season. But guess what, guy? What we've seen from the last 2 seasons from Todd Bowles, this has got to be the make or break year for Todd Bowles.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think if we get off to a slow start, I think there'll start to be talks. You know how people like to throw, like you said, hypotheticals around, and I think that if Todd Bowles doesn't make it past the first round of the playoffs, I mean, I think they're going to win the division, but that's just me being biased because the Bucs are my team. I think they're going to win the division, but if they don't get farther in the playoffs and maybe even get closer to the Super Bowl, I don't think Todd Bowles will be around next year.
I don't think so either. And it's a little bit tough here because we want to see every head coach, no different than Nick Sirianni, and people have heard me talk about this beforehand. Just because it doesn't matter what you do during the preseason, it's about the regular season. And we look at Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni knows he is starting on the hot seat. He knows this. And Tampa has had the Eagles' number as of late. So we're going to see whether this team is even prepared for what Todd Bowles has in store for the Eagles. But Nick Sirianni is no different. And there's a couple of head coaches that might be starting off the hot seat. Nick, I know, is one of them. The Eagles fan base, when you're turning up at Lincoln Financial Field. Now, their first game will be in Brazil, but even still against Green Bay, If the Eagles don't walk away with a win, I'm not saying obviously Nick Sirianni will be let go right then and there, but come that following week, that Monday morning radio, it's going to be absolutely horrendous because the fans will go absolutely ballistic. They already are now with the Phillies. And granted, I've seen the Phillies do this up, down, and they finally end up bouncing back. Well, we're hoping that they'll be just fine here towards the end of the season. As September's rolling around here very quick, we're about a week or so away for September baseball before everybody starts making a hunt for October. So, Gasp Guy, any final thoughts here before I let you go?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a couple things.
Yep.
Some players just to watch out for in this last preseason game, as we're winding down the 53-man roster. Zion McCollum, he ran he's going to be a good matchup for Tyreek Hill. I mean, he ran the 40-yard in 4.33 seconds. I mean, that's pretty good in the 22 combine when he was getting scouted. So I think he's going to be a good matchup for Tyreek and the guys on the outside, the speed guys that the Dolphins have. And also Rashid White, I think he's going to have a even better year this year. I mean, he ended last year with 990 rushing yards with 272 touches, six rushing touchdowns, 3.6 yards per attempt. And he can even catch out of the backfield, which last year he got 549 recovery yards with 70 catches, an average of 8.6 yards per catch. I mean, that's pretty. He's getting pretty good. And then Cade Otton also, I think he's going to have a better year this year. Last year he played like 97% of the team snaps, and he's a good check down for Baker Mayfield, And then just one last guy I got to go to the defense on this. For that, Jose Ramirez, he had 3 sacks in the game against the Jags and 2 knockdowns. I mean, in that game we had 5 sacks total, and he was for the majority of the sacks. He was there for them, All
right. Well, listen, we'd hope that everybody again remains healthy. More importantly, as we're coming every team the final week of the preseason, and then we're back to week 1. NFL season, and this year I think it's probably more explosive than we've seen in years past. But we thank you, Gasp Guy, for coming on with your weekly Bucs Report segment. We will talk to you again next week. Any big plans for the weekend other than hopefully getting some rest away from the sun?
Well, I wish I could, but I have to work tomorrow, so Sunday will probably be my only rest day.
Don't feel bad because I'm the same way too. Work never stops, so don't feel bad at all. But Gasp Guy, thank you for the Bucs Report, and we'll talk to you come next week.
All righty, sir. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye.
All right, there goes Gasp Guy, and we're going to take a quick commercial break because after the break, we are going to speak with. This is going to be a fun conversation. The history of fantasy sports and the stories of the people who made it happen. Who made it happen. Larry Schechter is going to be talking to me here after the break, so we're going to go on to the break here. We'll be right back. You're listening to Martinez Company live here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. We'll be right back.
Hi, folks. This is Gerard Moynihan of Moynihan Lumber, and I would like you to know that our company has been selling Anderson windows for over 60 years. See the complete line of Anderson windows at any of our 3 locations in North Reading, Beverly, or in Plastown, New Hampshire, or at MoynihanLumber.com.
What's up, Southwest Florida? Jim and the Beef Guy here. Fort Myers, we answered your call. We're pumped to announce the opening of our 2nd location. It's on 41 just north of the Edison Mall. And guys, nothing's changed here. The beef, the sausage, the breaded steak, our Maxwell Polish. Now serving you in 2 locations, Fort Myers and Bonita Springs. And don't forget, if you're having a party, check out our catering menu. Hey guys, when you're at the counter, don't call it Gardenia. It's pronounced Jardiniere.
Ion Tampa Bay is the latest news, weather, and traffic for Pinellas, Pasco, Ellsboro, Hernando, and surrounding communities. Stay connected on X, Facebook, and their website, iontp.com. Ion Tampa Bay keeps you informed on breaking news as it happens. Southwest Florida's newest game in town. Sports Radio 102.9, the game powered by Ion Tampa Bay. We'll be right back.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Don't just follow us on the socials. Call or text the show 727-858-6650 and let us know what's on your mind. Now back to Martinez and Company.
All right, welcome back. It is 10:31 here on the East Coast, 7:31 there on the West Coast. And joining me right now is Larry Schechter, who author of his book. And I would say it's been a while for him and I try to connect as I've been crazy busy. And thank you to Larry for taking his time for the history of fantasy sports and the stories of the people who made it happen. So first of all, Larry, welcome to the show. I do appreciate you taking some time out this morning to come on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So a couple of takeaways when it comes before we get into the thick of the book here. The time that ended up taking you, as I was reading through some of the excerpts there from the book, the time that ended up taking, the people that were involved, and even before that, your health, more importantly, what you had to go through just to put this book together, which you had referred to instead that you thought it was going to be something that was going to be quick, and then a time and a taking. Before we get into the history of the book itself, can you update us on your health and then what happened leading up to as you were getting ready to put the book together?
Well, my health is fine, but what happened is I've known for a very long time that somebody needed to write a book like this because, I look at the fantasy industry, this going back years, several years ago, I would look at the fantasy industry and we have millions and millions of people playing fantasy sports. And not just fantasy football, fantasy baseball, but, you got fantasy Iditarod, fantasy cricket, you got everything. And it's worldwide. It's become a $25 billion industry. You got, all these analysts and news services and stat services. It's just like crazy how big the industry is. So I've known for a long time, somebody should write a book and explain how all this happened. Where did it come from? And I kind of put that on the back burner for a long time, but a little over 2 years ago, what you're referring to is a little over 2 years ago, I had a heart attack and I ended up on a ventilator for 5 days and my recovery was not looking promising at all. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. I was unconscious on a ventilator, but I basically, as you can see, I recovered and my doctor thought it was kind of a miracle that I recovered. They weren't expecting me to recover, but during my time in the hospital, actually not even my time in the hospital, it was when I first became consciously aware that I was on a ventilator and my life was in jeopardy. I had these thoughts go through my head like, oh my God, I'm too young to die. What about my kids, my girlfriend, and all these things. And this thought went through my head, I should have written that book. So after I recovered, when I was in the hospital, I got determined, okay, I'm going to write this book. And I thought it was something I could knock out pretty quickly, like in a few months, but I had no idea what I was getting into. It took it took me 18 months of pretty much full-time work, researching, interviewing dozens and dozens of people. It just was a humongous project, but I'm glad, I'm very glad I did it because, the book is great. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because of the information I learned and the stories I got from people was fascinating. So originally my goal was, I'm going to write a book called The History of Fantasy Sports. But as I started to research and talk to people, I realized, there's so many fascinating stories that, what I could do is I could just write the facts and figures and what happened when, and that would tell the whole story of the history of fantasy sports, but it would also come off like a very boring research paper. But by telling all these stories of people involved has made it a very easy read. People say it's fascinating. The Midwest Book Review said it's like fascinating from start to finish. The reviews are fantastic. So that's what it's about.
We can talk about getting the facts and information from people, because you can hear, someone can tell you a story. It's almost like telephone back in the day when you hear a story from the first person, by the time it gets back to you and it goes back around and becomes something completely different. For people who gave you the information that you needed to be able to put it into your book, how much did you have to go back and then hear if someone actually told you the actual information that you needed, or you have to go back and then fact check to make sure that it was credible?
Yeah, it was a pain in the butt, what you're talking about, because, I can't remember, can you even remember what you had for lunch yesterday? Now I'm asking people, something happened 30 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. And, they can't remember, or their memory's not clear. So it was a combination of talking to people and researching, Googling article after article after article. There's also a website that was great. It's called newspapers.com, where you can look up articles from years ago. So, I would have somebody tell me something, and then later I'd find an article where they were quoted 20 years ago and they said something different. So I would go with what they said 20 years ago is more accurate.
Right.
But it was a pain. Sometimes I did a whole bunch of Zoom interviews with people, and I would feel, at times I felt like I'm an attorney doing a deposition with somebody. You just said X, but 20 years ago you said Y. What, were you lying then or you were lying now?
Yeah, no, and it's true though, because if you want to make sure when you put out the information out there, even if it's on social media, that wants to be credible, because the worst thing is to put something out. We've seen former athletes, they've talked about a story, just like you mentioned, where they mentioned it as if it just happened yesterday, and then someone else who's next to them saying, well, I was there. That's not exactly what ended up happening. And there's things that we forget, because you're right. A lot of times there's things that we want to talk about, and even if we went to our favorite restaurant yesterday, ask us what we had, it becomes a completely different story. So I'm glad that you end up taking the time. And I know the Zoom calls are never easy, because then you have to work around everyone else's schedule as well. So it had, within the time of just putting the elements of the Zoom calls, how many hours were just involved on that portion, even before all the other facts you end up finding?
Well, I don't, overall, I would say I worked probably an average of full time, 40 hours a week, not always like 8 to 5, but, various points during the day. It was pretty much like a full time job for 18 months. And then after that, it's been, pretty much almost a full time job, just getting the book published, doing things like I'm doing right now with you to let people know about it. And I'm going to be at this full time for a long, long time, because, everybody who plays fantasy sports needs to hear about this book. You need to get it and read it, because everybody who likes fantasy sports is loving the book. There's never been anything like it. There will never be anything like it again. There's no reason for anybody to try to duplicate it. So, people who like fantasy sports, or if you know somebody who plays fantasy sports, it makes a great gift.
No, it does make a great gift, because there's a gentleman that we ran into when we were in Vegas, and he wrote about the history of the NFL and where it started. So you guys could probably end up taking a book tour together, because he had wrote about when what people tend to remember is that when it started as the NFL AFL before it became then the NFC AFC and finally the NFL. But in one part of your book here, you talk about the fantasy sports industry has an estimated 50 million players just in the U.S. and has grown to a $25 billion worldwide industry. To me, first of all, I never knew of it being so big. Now, I'm not a gambler. I mentioned with Pete on his show in the morning, but I'm just amazed of the amount of people and the amount of money that comes across with fantasy sports.
Yeah, well, that's only like a fraction of it. That what's really amazing is 200 million people in India play fantasy cricket.
Wow.
That's 4 times the amount of people that play fantasy in the U.S. are playing cricket in India. Not necessarily actively playing cricket, but the biggest cricket company in India has like 200 million registered users. And, it's worldwide. People playing fantasy soccer in, Europe and South America. It's pretty much a worldwide thing now. And my book starts with like the precursors of fantasy sports, the origins of fantasy baseball, the origins of fantasy football, the first websites, newspaper games, first commercial games, stat services, the first publications, radio, right through, injury experts, the Fantasy Sports Trade Association, and then there's the chapter on fantasy worldwide. So I cover everything.
And you're talking about, and on the radio, we hear like weekly, the same way you see it on TV, where people come out different, whether being DraftKings, other folks as well, local radio, and they talk about the fantasy version as far as what people can expect if they're playing. You also mentioned too before, even if first game is played, how people are just putting down bets and on their fantasy teams, and in these fantasy leagues as they build bigger. It seems like every year, and now people have gone to locations where they've done they've rented out warehouse size because they've gone out and they put the guys that they want on their teams, defensively, offense, and then obviously the individual players. For people who've never either bet on fantasy sports or it's the first time they're coming across, every week since we get a different taste of a different person, whether it being the major networks or on the radio, how much does that come into your own accountability if you're just coming into the sport? How much do you pay attention to that, or do you end up doing more of your own research so that when it's come, if you are betting or the team you're picking on, that you're not going on just by the bias of what the NFL networks or other networks are telling you?
Well, when I play fantasy sports myself, I'm using my own opinions, but I'll also listen to others. But yeah, you get a wide range of it. Now, one thing I want to mention, fantasy sports is not just about betting. What you're referring to is really daily fantasy sports. Daily fantasy sports is more. It's technically it's not betting, but it's more like betting. Traditional fantasy sports are season-long contests. Where if you're in fantasy football, it's going to be the whole 18 weeks of football, 26 weeks of baseball, whatever. And in those contests, some leagues have money involved. Most leagues probably have at least a little bit of money, prize money involved, maybe a trophy. But mostly those fantasy sports aren't about money or betting. It's mostly about, the competition, camaraderie. It brings coworkers together, fathers and sons together. There's one of the guys in my book, Mark Mariani, who was a big executive at CBS Sports and Turner Sports. He said when he first was invited to play in a fantasy football league, he had just gotten this job in Chicago, and when he was invited to play fantasy football league, he realized, if I get in this league, I'm going to be able to call my boss's 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 boss in the big fancy office in Manhattan, and he's going to take my call to talk fantasy football, where ordinarily there's not a chance in hell this guy would ever take a phone call from this guy. So he got in the league, and there's another story, the National Fantasy Football Championship, which holds drafts in Vegas. You got a guy, there's a guy sitting at a draft table. On one side of him, he's got a plumber. On the other side of him, he's got the CEO of a major Fortune 500 company. And the two of them are talking like they're best buddies. That's like the power of fantasy sports. One of the threads through the book is about, this whole, I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is, this whole way that fantasy sports has created all these relationships. And, you got some people started fantasy leagues just as a way of keeping friends together. Like there's a guy in college when he was graduating college, he was thinking he and his buddies were going to probably drift apart, which happens to a lot of people when you leave college. So they started this fantasy league as a way of hopefully keeping in touch. and it worked brilliantly. They're still playing 50 years later.
No, and I think that's, you bring up a great point there, because we've seen people, and a lot of people have formed relationships because of fantasy, fantasy sports, fantasy baseball, fantasy football. And you have even some that are a married couple and they met because of it. And then that adds a layer to competition amongst what they do professionally in their lives. But fantasy sports and fantasy football in general, I think what the funny part is with a lot of the NFL athletes now, the questions that are asked on some of the either pregame or postgame, especially during training camp, they'll say, "Hey, by the way, did you see in fantasy football, X amount of yards, X amount, whatever it was?" And they get upset because they say, "I'm not worried about fantasy football. I'm worried about what I do on the field." So putting this parts together in the book, to a certain extent, the athletes don't like, and not saying all of them do, it's only a small percentage that don't like it, but a lot of people base their season and what they're going to do off of fantasy sports.
Well, the players, the professional players keep, their job as a professional player separate from their fantasy statistics.
Right.
Because, if you're a running back in the NFL and you're picking up blitz protection, you got to do a good job of blitz protection. And that has nothing to do with your fantasy stats. So they keep it separate. But there's been an evolution there too of when fantasy first started. I mean, the professional athletes, pretty much didn't have any clue what it was about. And some of them, when they learned about it, some of them would get annoyed. Some of them would, embrace it. But there's been an evolution where they really, for the most part, embrace it now. Because you got fantasy. I mean, you got Major League Baseball players are in fantasy football leagues, like Mike Trout, Alex Bregman, and some other professional baseball players. They have a fantasy football league. And Bobby Bonilla, I've got a story in the book about Bobby Bonilla when he was with the Orioles. Him and Cal Ripken Jr. and some other people on the Orioles. They had a fantasy football league. Bonilla was the commissioner of it. I've got a story about Cal Ripken Jr. playing Stratomatic baseball with the Orioles baseball announcer John Miller on a plane from Baltimore to the West Coast. Because Stratomatic and APA baseball and football and some other things are in the first chapter because they were kind of a precursor to fantasy sports.
So Stratomatic, I noticed that in the book as well. Can you explain that just a little bit more, how that came into play?
Well, what I call fantasy sports, is where you're in some kind of competition that's based on statistics that players have not yet produced. Okay. It's going to be what they do this coming season. Stratomatic, APA, were based on, well, I shouldn't say were, they still exist. They are based on the prior year statistics of players. So that's the difference. And but they were a precursor. You go back, years and years ago, there was like tabletop games where you'd push a penny into a spring activated bat, and it would hit the penny into like a hole to determine if you got like a single, double, home run, out, or whatever. So like that was like the very beginning of games, like tabletop games like this. Then you had like Catico All-Star Baseball, Frank Layden football. Then you had APA, Stratomatic. So these were kind of all precursors to modern fantasy sports. But a lot of people have played Stratomatic in particular. A lot of people who are like Major League Baseball executives or got into the fantasy industry. A lot of them started playing Stratomatic before fantasy really existed.
Now, in the book as well, you talk about the origins of fantasy football, where it looks like it was born in October of 1962 when the Raiders went to New York for a game against the Titans, and now the New York Jets. The Titans also, people remember as well, was when Houston Oilers then became now the Tennessee Titans. But this was like way back in the day for those who didn't know. You're looking back at 1962, and obviously where it's evolved now to 2024. Who would have thought back in 62, that's where the origins of this, fantasy football would have started. And yet to look where it has evolved from just something that looked like, a cocktail conversation to what it is today. Because what, in your opinion, as you wrote the book here, did those men, even though if they're not around, but even would they ever even thought of how big and how much of a $1 billion industry this would have become today?
No, the guy who really invented fantasy football, his name is Bill Winkenbach.
Right.
And what he did is he actually, prior to what you're talking about in '62, he actually had like a primitive version of a fantasy baseball game, which was primarily about home runs. He had a PGA golf game based on, everybody would pick a few players and you'd total up their score for the tournament that week. So he actually had those, and he was on a trip, as you said, to New York, because he was a part owner of the Raiders, and they went to New York to play the Titans, as you said. And he told a couple of people he was with about his games, and they said, "Let's do one for football," and that's kind of where it came from. And the season was already underway in '62, so they didn't actually start their game till '63. But the thing is, it was all about a connection with the Oakland Raiders. Like, you had to have some kind of connection to the Raiders or the media. So, Winkenbach and these other guys, it was kind of just like a game for themselves mostly. They had no idea they were creating something that would catch on, and they didn't attempt to have it catch on. But there's a guy named Andy Musolimas who was in that original league. He ended up buying a bar in Oakland a little bit later on, and he decided to make the game available to his patrons. So a lot of his patrons were interested, and he formed a fantasy football league for them. And, the next year there was demand. They had a second league, then a third league. He's the guy that really is credited with spreading fantasy football. He created these leagues at his bar, and it grew and it grew. And then people, word of mouth, it would spread. And, before you know it, people would be calling his bar from like Hawaii or somewhere asking for the rules of the game. And the thing is, like, what I just said is kind of like, again, like the facts and figures.
Right.
But I Googled, like, I Googled like article after article after article about Andy Musolimas, to the point where I'm reading the same information, like for the 30th time. But once in a while, there'd be some little tidbit I hadn't seen before. And I'm doing this with Andy Musolimas. And after, I don't know how many articles, all of a sudden I find out something that had not been mentioned in the first 15, 20 articles or whatever. The guy was a frickin' war hero.
Oh, wow.
What he did with fantasy football was completely irrelevant to this. When he was 17 when Pearl Harbor happened, and he enlisted with the Army, Special Forces, I think it was. And he enlisted in something where the recruiter said 97% of you are not going to return alive.
Wow.
But he volunteered anyway, and he always had a cyanide pill with him so he could kill himself if he got caught by the enemy. But obviously he made it through and went back to Oakland, and so it's amazing. And when he was like 90 something years old, he was flown to Washington to get a special medal from Congress or whatever it is. He was like the only surviving member of his unit. I mean, not the only one who survived the war, but the only one who's still alive, at age 90 or whatever it was.
Now, spawning off as we have about another minute or so here, Larry, been the author of History of Fantasy Sports and the Stories of the People Who Made It Happen. Larry Schechter, the author, joining me here this morning. So how many stories, Larry, could you come up with? Because every story that someone tells can end up writing its own book. So from hearing, like you had just mentioned, a war story, and I'm pretty sure there's other stories in between those stories, how many other books could you just say, just off the top of your head, from all the stories that you heard, how many more could you possibly write that may not be in relation to fantasy sports?
Oh, well, some of them, yeah. There's some of these stories could be a book too. Like there's one I'll just say real quickly. A guy, who's highlighted in the book. He was on his honeymoon at a hotel in the World Trade Center on 9/11.
Okay.
And his story is amazing. And it's not in my book just because it's some amazing story. It's in there because it's actually relevant to how he ended up getting into the fantasy industry. Before we run out of time, I'll just mention real quickly the book is available paperback and ebook on most booksellers' websites. It's especially Amazon. If somebody wants to get all the details and read all the reviews are fantastic. Amazon has lots of reviews by both customers and editorial people.
And it's one thing I was going to make sure you mentioned before we end up going off here, but if someone requests, I'm not too sure if the sellers will be able to do so would you autograph or at least sign a book for someone in case they want it because they want to either put it up in their bookshelf or their mantles?
Well, if I see him somewhere, I will.
All right.
But I can't like send out autographed books, but they'd have to run into me somewhere and bring the book.
Okay. And
I'm going to be doing a book signing at the Barnes and Noble in Plantation in about a month. I forget the date. If somebody's interested in that, they can look at Barnes and Noble in Plantation and get the date. And I'll be at some other events in the future. But people, if you like fantasy sports, or if you know somebody who likes fantasy sports, get the book. They're going to love it. I guarantee you. It's easy to say, "Oh, you're going to love the book." In this case, I swear it's really true. I mean, just look at the reviews.
Not even as much of reviews. There's so much information in there. Like I said, you sent me a copy of it, and I do appreciate it. But there's so much information in there. You have to really, when you read one or two of the pages, you have to kind of go back because there's the story within the story in the book, but just the history behind it. So you can't, it's not one of those books like you pick up and just quickly kind of skim through it. You really have to get in depth and in detail. And I think that's why you're getting so many great reviews because, again, that's what people are looking for. You want that factual information for people to come on and say, the reason why I can't put this book down is because Larry made it so interesting for me to read that I have to go back. It's like a favorite movie. You go back and watch it over and over again because there's parts you want to pick up on it. And that's the same way it was with your book here. So, Larry, I appreciate your patience, number one, for you able to come on. I'll make sure to have you back on as well because we'll get into a little more as far as back in your book here. And if once you find out exactly where you're going to end up being, because I would love to meet you as well and get your book signed. But let me know, and I'll make sure I'll share it out with everyone else.
I'll put this on X in a minute. I hate calling it X. I got to call it Twitter. I'll put it on Twitter in a minute. I'm going to tag you, and I'll just give the date in case anybody happens to be near Plantation. I'll put up the date on there.
Sure, no problem. Well, Larry, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed your weekend. And real quick, is there a part 2 coming out?
No. I mean, this took so much effort.
Right.
But there's really no reason for a part 2. I mean, if there was ever a part 2, it wouldn't be for years from now.
Right.
I mean, this really covers it. And, I could have written, the book's like 300 pages. I could have written 500 pages or 600 pages, but that would be too much.
No, I think it was well balanced. And again, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you taking more of the energy, even with your health, as you had mentioned inside the book, to make sure you're fully recovered. So thank God you're still with us.
My health is actually great. It really is. It's kind of miraculous, but my health is great.
That's awesome. Well, Larry, I appreciate it. Have yourself a great weekend, and thank you for coming on Sports Radio 102.9.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we are going to take here a quick break. As the top of the hour, we will get into the conversation with Coach Brown, again with our goalkeeper, Senorita Galak, and you guys will be hearing that here at the top of the hour. So you are listening to Martinez and Company here live on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. We'll get into this commercial break. Don't forget you guys can watch and listen into the show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10 to 12, and start your day off with the Pete Shepard Show. And thank you to everyone, the new followers, to not only to us here at Sports Radio, but more importantly to Pete Shepard in the morning. I heard he picked up a slew of followers, and which we do appreciate, along with everyone else too, that can end up, follow us here on the network at SR1029 The Game on X. Also for visiting the website, SR1029thegame.com. Don't forget you can download the app directly from the website, and information about our Tampa Bay Sun Football Club, the USL Super League inaugural season. You guys can go on the website as well, find out information about them, and more importantly, also about USF Athletics, the men and women's soccer, as the women are winning. They've won 2 games in a row, and then the men last night lost their first match, but it's okay. Good thing is there's another match coming. So we'll get into it after the break. You're listening to Martinez and Company here live on the Coastal Sports Network.
Hi, folks. This is Gerard Moynihan of Moynihan Lumber, and I would like you to know that our company has been selling Anderson windows for over 60 years. See the complete line of Anderson windows at any of our 3 locations in North Reading, Beverly, or in Plastown, New Hampshire, or at MoynihanLumber.com.
What's up, Southwest Florida? Jimmy the Beef Guy here. Fort Myers, we answered your call. We're pumped to announce the opening of our second location. It's on 41 just north of the Edison Mall. And guys, nothing's changed here. The beef, the sausage, the breaded steak, our Maxwell Polish. Now serving you in 2 locations, Fort Myers and Bonita Springs. And don't forget, if you're having a party, check out our catering menu.
Hey guys, when you're at the counter, don't call it gardenia. It's pronounced Chardonnay.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute?
When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
All right, class, let's hear what everyone did this weekend. Jill?
Well, I raised my older sister to a big oak tree. It was at least 100 years old. My mom said I must have set a record or something. And then we went down by a stream and perched up on this huge rock and saw all these little minnows swimming around way below us. And then I rescued my little brother from an evil slug king who was guarding him at the bush fortress. And my sister and I brought him back to our super twig fort for safety. And then we all laid out and told stories until it got dark. And the Big Dipper led us all the way home.
Wow. Awesome. Where were you, Jill?
Yeah. We went to the forest. It's not that far away. Anyone want to come this weekend?
Ask your parents to take you and your friends to the forest this week and find the fun, adventurous you. It's closer than you think. Check out discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Download the Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game app and tell your friends that Florida has a new leader in digital sports radio. Now back to Martinez and Company on the Riptide Media Network.
Well, it's not the Riptide Media Network, but it's okay. Every once in a while, some things get through. It is the Coastal Sports Network, as some things, when they get loaded back up there, it's completely different. But it is the Coastal Sports Network, Sports Radio 102.9 from The Game. As you guys see behind me, part of the Broad Street South Network, as that's where everything originally started. And now, of course, we are over on the Coastal Sports Network, which was a pivot just about over a month ago or so. So thank you all for once again tuning in. We do appreciate it. And also for downloading the app at sr1029thegame.com. Don't forget, you can visit the website when you have the opportunity of doing so and download the app. Therefore, you won't miss a show and you'll hear the host lineups that we have, like Marshall Time Podcast with Jonathan Marshall and his brother Josh, as they get into the NBA. Also, let's chat with Kat and Pat as they talk about everything that goes on in their livelihood. And I would tell you, if you are a faint of heart, meaning if there's certain type of language that you don't like, you may not want to listen to it. But if you like the rawness of people and when they actually tell a story, you are really, really going to enjoy that show as well, which is available over on our digital sports platform. Other NFL shows that are coming up here as the NFL season gets ready to get ramped up. And also don't forget, you can hear the replays of all of our shows over on the website. Go over to Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game tab. And you go in there, you'll be able to see the shows as they went live back on instant replay once I get everything loaded up and ready for there as well. Along with this afternoon, my hermano, Rich Q, The Drive with Q, he'll be on from 3 to 5. He's also live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday when he's not doing any kind of boxing matches, because he is always crazy busy as well, and I do appreciate my hermano. So we are going to get into the conversation here with, and I'm thankful for Coach and for Señorita Galac to take their time yesterday to come on. We had a tremendous conversation. One thing that you will hear in the second part of our conversation here is that, yes, if you want to follow along, as I mentioned to him yesterday, when it's in Spanish, hit number 1 on your phone. And then therefore you can listen to it as well. So I'm going to kick things off here. So I will switch this over. And again, I can't thank Coach Brown for taking time away from the practice pitch to come on with me yesterday. So here is the conversation with Coach. Said right out the gate that you want to be the toughest match for you guys to date. Now, call me crazy, which I know every head coach wants to start off with a win. Your wife, Mrs. Brown, who I was able to cover last Sunday, ended up putting a draw at the Tampa Bay Sun Football Club. But I know you want to start with the win. But I will say, looks like coming off your very first loss have given your team and you yourself as a coach that firepower to come out now with 10 crazy unanswered goals for the most part. But Coach Brown, thanks for taking the time off the pitch to come on with me today. I do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
No problem. So game 1, match 1 for the team, and it was going to be a tough one. You know it, against FSU. The challenge for yourself taking over your wife's cleats, as the article was put out there, it was going to be a tough task, but you guys have been together for 25 years. So I was working together. I know the marriage has been longer than that, but 25 years, you guys have been working together, 17 years with your wife as well. What was the toughest transition, knowing that you are now going to come from just being somewhat never behind the scenes, but you were alongside with her, to then taking over the head coaching responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you obviously talked to Denise, you know how much energy she has. And I think that was the biggest thing, because we're two different personalities and I think we complement each other well. So I've had to take on a different kind of role for myself, more involved with the players, the relationship piece. And I think Denise, as the head coach, handled that. And I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than I probably gave it credit for. I mean, I truly believe it's such a huge piece in keeping your group together, and it's worth the time. I just, now that I'm actually doing it myself, and along with obviously the assistance of the rest of my staff, it is a lot more work than I anticipated, but I know it's a necessary, it's necessary, in the grand scheme of things, because I think our players, every player wants to be communicated with and wants to understand what their role is and where they stand. And they don't want to have, and I try and fill in those blanks. I mean, they may not always hear what they want to hear, but at least they're getting information and they know where they stand. And I think that's an important part of leading a program, is making sure that the players understand where they fit.
And I think, as you said, the energy from Denise, from your wife, as she talked about at a post-game conference on Sunday, you can tell you guys have such a great bond together because it resonates off of both of you. So it's not like one over the other. You guys have the same kind of energy, because I watched you in the first match. And even from last night, the highlights and majority of the game that I ended up watching, as I was doing double duties, have a live show on last night, along with watching what was going on the pitch as well. But you guys have that same intensity, meaning that winning atmosphere it's not like one minus the other. You guys are in the same even keel that you want to see how well this team is going to end up doing. USF may not be one of those, as we see overseas, the bigger name clubs that are out there, but USF is finally coming to their own. It's been like that for years. You guys have made NCAA tournament appearances, and ultimately is to win a tournament altogether. But coming away from what your wife had left over to you, and I know it's tough when you're making that transition, what would be one of the key elements that you believe you have taken that both you guys shared while you were together that was able to carry over now you as a head coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think Denise and I worked really hard to, along with previous and current assistants, but obviously us living together, this started way back when we started working together at a different university, and we've always had a model of play in place that we wanted to implement. I think it's a lot different than most programs. Most programs are more, atypical in terms of being direct and pressing teams and trying to get from point A to point B as quickly as they can. And that really hasn't ever been a thought for us. Like we grew up both playing internationally. You know, after college, we both played professionally and both represented our national teams at different stages. And so we're big fans of the international game, which I think is pretty obvious by the way that we recruit, even dating back to when we were at VCU before we got to USF. But we like that mix, and it fits our model of play. And I think those players enjoy playing in our system of play. So I think that's something that her and I together have taken a lot of pride in, is establishing what we feel like is a kind of different pathway of a model of play in the college game today, and trying to be successful at it. Right. I mean, this year it's, you know, and even Denise and I started talking about it the last few years, that we needed to start to like make tweaks to the way we're playing,
right, without
losing that identity. Right. I mean, last couple years, we maybe overpossessed the ball to a degree. And the goal this year was to still maintain our identity of a possession-based group, but to get the girls to think about being a little bit more relentless and dynamic about going forward when the opportunity presented itself. So I think I think the enjoyment of the game is even at, you know, we've been doing it as long as Denise and I have now, 25 years, is always trying to find ways where you can keep your identity, but make little tweaks and reinvent yourself a little bit and make it exciting, not only for yourself, but for your players, right? I mean, they want to be challenged, and they don't, you know, today's day and age, right? I mean, with social media and stuff, and it's just, you know, it carries over onto the field. So if we're a team that just sits in a low block and defends the entire time, and then we counter every once in a while, no one's gonna really enjoy that like so much. So I mean, we have to kind of find that line where we can be ourselves, be effective, but also be having an element of excitement for not only our players, but our fans.
Now you bring up social media there, which is, it's good for, and we're going to touch on that for a second here, because social media could be the best thing in the world used the right way. It can also be the worst thing in the world, depending on who comes across, because two people could put out the same message, but depending how another person perceives it or they read it, it's either, is that something positive, or are they kind of throwing shade, as the younger kids like to say?
Yeah.
We never mentioned it that way. As far as back with us, it was a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, social media, it could be really great, because for taking last night, for example, 5-0 ended up being the final. We saw defensively for USF in the same way, offensively on the ball, you guys on the pitch, both sides, it played out so well last evening, even compared to match number 2. But last night, you can see where gradually there was that step up in the field of play. Now, you go back to social media for a second, and either you would have what I believe lots of people then now saying how resilient this team looked. It looked so much different in match number 1 compared to match number 3. But the funny thing is that they'd rather talk about something that, oh, we had this loss and look how bad we looked and everything else. The winning doesn't come across as much on social media, unless those of us that are out there in the media, we put things out to make sure that everybody knows it's always an even keel. When it comes to social media and knowing that you have every different aspect of life coming through, like you guys had mentioned, playing internationally, and the women that you guys have playing on the team right now, they come from different parts of the world. When someone decides to, and I wouldn't even say judge, when they decide they want to criticize the match play, in the back of your mind, is it one of those things where you just kind of push it aside because you know the product that you have in the field? Or do you address your athlete to let them say, listen, if you come across this post here, pay no mind to it, because they're not on the pitch the way you guys are?
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I don't follow social media that much. Like, I mean, I don't post stuff.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, And I know, listen, I know maybe that's old school. I don't know, but I don't care what people think about. I mean, obviously, I hope we're putting on a good product for our fans, but like my main objective is to make sure that our girls understand and believe in what we're doing, and that we're all on the same page. So like, I don't go and read social media. Like, I try and tell our girls not to like read into it much. I mean, Denise and I have a twin son and daughter who are just turned 19. So obviously they're exposed to that social media aspect in today's world. But honestly, I don't care. Like, I mean, my goal is to help us continue to move in the right direction. And, even after I don't think the score of the FSU game was indicative of like the product on the field at all.
Correct.
Like, I think it's a misrepresentation and people might look at it, but I mean, I thought the first half, that we had a really good game plan. Our girls like created opportunities. We were unfortunate. Like, as I said before, when they interviewed me after the game, the first goal was it was a cross that the girl hit, and it turned into a shot. And that's part of the game, and
Right.
we have to manage it better. And then the second goal was just a miscommunication. But I mean, realistically, I felt like we could have gone into half 0-0, and then, not only 0-0, but knowing that we had like 2 or 3 chances that were legitimate chances where we got at them. Now, I think the backbreaker was giving up the early third goal in the beginning of the second half. And then at that point, it wasn't like I was like cashing in the game, but I was thinking about Sunday, right? And the fact that we had to turn around and play Sunday. I had to think about minutes, about the opponent that we were facing right at that moment in FSU. And so then you start trying to give opportunities for some of the younger players to get in there and experience what it is to play against the number one team in the country. And then we give up a couple more goals, and obviously it looks a lot worse than it really was. But I was really happy with the overall performance. I mean, I think 4 out of the 5 goals that we gave up in that game were easily avoidable. They were mistakes that I don't think FSU really earned them. It was just, unfortunate situations or a very easy fix for us. Like, I feel like one of their goals, they really it was a legitimate goal. They broke us down, and there was not much to really do about that other than go to the video and figure out how to, rectify that situation if it happened again. But in general, I was really pleased. And that's what I told the players. Like, we got to look at the positives.
Mm-hmm.
And it is our first game, true game. And we played the number one team in the country. And, listen, I mean, they're going to lose several, a handful of 7-8 players here in about, a week or less than a week for players representing, their country in the U20 World Cup. So, that's when they're going to be at their most vulnerable, right? I mean, they're going to lose, 6-7 players. And those are players that start for them, obviously, that are going to go off and represent the U.S. and Brazil and Colombia in the U20 World Cup. And so they might lose a game, but I mean, at full strength, without losing any players, that's probably one of the best attacking teams that I've seen play or played against in a number of years. I think they're susceptible in the back, but I mean, in terms of going forward at you, it doesn't get much dangerous than that group that they have running up there. So I'm happy for the opportunity to play them, and I think we're going to be better for it down the road. So, if we're able to make it into the, NCAA tournament, and there's a chance we end up facing them again, we're gonna be able to go back and take a look at this match and see where we can make things better.
Yep. And we're going to piggyback just off of what you said there too, because that's the way I looked at it as well. Looking out at match number 1, and even though it could have been a tale of two different tales, but I do like, and I think we're on the same page, because even though I couldn't hear being down on the pitch as far as what was the action by the play-by-play announcers, but you can see it where the transition to come into where the other athletes had the opportunities to come in and switch them out, and rightfully so. And like you said, it was going to be another match again on Sunday. Add the heat, of course, down here in Florida. For a lot of folks that don't know, the humidity, even though they say it's at 100%, we all know it's about 1,000, maybe 2,000%, because it's ungodly ridiculous. And even the game on Sunday, they took a 3-minute break, that the hydration break. But Coach, for the way you handled game 1, I liked it. I really respected the way you end up handling, because you're right. It could have been, a scoreless game going into the half. And the second goal, yes, it was a miscommunication. And as a goalkeeper here in a second, because I did see your assistant coach come out to the side and just pretty much explain to her, like, just shake it off. Don't worry about it. It's something that happens. I think that's the one thing, as even in the media, it's the same exact way. We could end up having someone talk to us, and in your mind, you know exactly what you wanted to say, and it doesn't come out the same exact way. And then you catch yourself in that moment, like, all right, I won't say that again, and I'll figure it out. But game 1, match 1, I really liked it because, yes, it was USF first half, no doubt about it. Even with the 2 goals given up, it was definitely in the first half to belong to USF. But I do like, because you made a great point, that when it comes down towards the end of the season and you guys make that tournament appearance, you know what to expect. Not only that, but then you see the games that follow afterwards. So it was good to go after them the very first game, the very first match of the season. That's what I appreciate, I think, the most of what you have done for USF, because it does set that standard off for the rest of them. Because now you look at match number 2, especially match number 3, 5-0, 5-1, makes a big difference. And that confidence maker, you can see it in the team. In last night's play with that 3-5-2 formation, you can see that obviously it makes a difference on the pitch. Now, the rain probably didn't help. It hinders a little bit because of the ball traveling on the pitch. But nonetheless, I think the way it was handled in the last 2 games, especially last night, you can start seeing more of the confidence. Even if you're not in the field and you can watch it the same way I did, or the televised game, you can see the bigger confidence within the team itself. So trying now 2-game win streak, and we hope now it becomes 3. It's tough. It's never easy in soccer, but you had 2-game win streak, and your athletes right now are feeling very confident. Your coaching staff is feeling confident. How much of a takeaway, meaning you get to celebrate for that first, 1 minute, 2 minutes after the match is done? How much of that do you take into, let's just say, last evening, and now you go into a practice field the way you did today? When you turn around and you say, okay, that was our win number 2. Here's what we've done for the last 2 matches, and we are feeling good. Let's put that to the side and let's focus upon our next match.
Yeah, I mean, we did it on the field after the game. Like I kind of went through the positives and told them, what I thought we had done well as a group, and then we talked about areas that we felt like we need to be better at, and of course, I want them to enjoy the moment. Like, I want the players to enjoy the moment as it's happening. And because you never know how long you're going to get in these games and in this sport. So I really want the girls to enjoy each other and enjoy that moment. But as soon as we brought them in and we congratulated them, it was kind of like, all right, let's focus on recovery. Let's focus on getting ready for Sunday, because we got a really tough match. I mean, our matches with FGCU are always very tight and competitive, and they've won a lot of conference championships there, and Coach Blankenship and his staffs have always done a really good job. So it's we got to kind of put this in the rear view and take the positives, but we all and kind of dive into what we can do better, and focus on that and focus on getting recovered and ready. So it was almost immediate, I mean, it's not one of those things like, hey, our season's so compact,
right,
that you can't be like, hey, take 24 hours and really enjoy yourself. It's you got 10 minutes to enjoy yourself. And we got to start thinking about our next opponent, because it just kind of really right on top of us.
Now, I want to take it for this last question here. I'll have a little funny one afterwards. But as you mentioned that you and your wife both played internationally as an athlete, because we saw last night, One of your athletes from our friends to the north up in Canada, Sophia had her first goal last night in her career, matching what she did in the same way you guys in your career. When you make that first goal, and it's like, we all hear the old expression, well, those of us are older, getting that monkey off your back because you're waiting for that moment to happen. How much in soccer, because it is not, as many people don't want to think that it's one of the easier sports. It's not the easiest sport to be able to score a goal, because even though you may have this massive net that a lot of people see on TV and when they're out there at the match, different because as you want to place and kick the ball towards the goal, sometimes it goes wide, sometimes it goes high above over the net. But that first goal that you had in your career, the same one with Sophia last night, what's the feeling like to finally get that first goal and then just worry about everything else? Like it'll come naturally.
Yeah, no, I think it was huge for Sophia. Like, and any new player, or she's a freshman, so and she wasn't able to play on Sunday against Jacksonville because she had got the flu or something, but she was out. So we just, out of caution and just kind of letting her body like heal, we chose not to play her. And so I think the great thing was that her entire family, I think, was there last night. I think they had like 15 people there, so it was great for her to score. And I think she, sometimes you get a little tight as a new player, as a freshman, and moments like that kind of like can be like light bulb moments for you, and they can really help you just kind of like take a deep, exhale and be like, all right, that's done. And then because I felt like, even in training, she was really pushing to score goals, and you could just tell she a little bit too tight at times. And so for her to get that last night and, was huge. And so, yeah, I mean, and I told her made sure after we broke huddle from last night's game, I patted her on the back and just said, that's awesome. Congratulations. You're going to, remember this moment, right? Because your first goal in college only comes once. And so I think she was, big smile on her face. So she was excited. So, we're just, and then today we were back at it, like we were fortunate last night to be able to share a lot of minutes. So nobody, got overplayed. And I think that's the best part of our group this year, is that we're probably, deeper than any team that we've had at USF. Now, like, are we destined to do some of the great things that previous, teams at USF have done? That remains to be seen. But I can tell you for sure that this group is very deep, and it's very competitive at training to win spots across the board. So I love that about our group, and I think that is going to help us, especially as we get further into the season, having players and having the ability to go to your bench and not have the level drop, and the ability to get, new players significant time and game real match moments is going to carry a lot of weight for us. So, we're really excited about this group, and we just don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We want to relish what we do well, but the girls know it's like, our whole mantra, raise the standard, is making sure that we don't kind of get ahead of ourselves and start thinking we've arrived, even off the back of, two, successful games. Like the games are going to continue to get harder, and the stakes for games, especially when you get into conference play, become a lot more meaningful. And, both teams want those 3 points. And so, it brings a whole nother like element to a match. So, but I'm really pleased with where we're at right now. And I'm really pleased with our mentality and the girls' ability to kind of recenter even after like a win and go like, all right, let's get back to work.
Yep, I agree. And I'm excited for this season. I think the way it started off right now, 2-1 early on, which is a good place to be, because again, as you mentioned, you're going to lose a couple of your athletes because of the cup they're going to be playing in. But I do like the way the season is playing out right now. I think the coaching staff, again, being on the pitch, game one. I like how everyone communicated back and forth with each other. So I'm excited to see what's going to end up happening here. But the last question I have for you before you bring on your goalkeeper is that as a husband-wife team, you guys always have that competition within each other. Now, you had the ability, obviously, when you guys were both on the same field. Now it's two different fields. So both in season, obviously with Tampa Bay Sun Football Club, with USF as well. At the end of the day, once the games are played, the matches are played, the big thing is that you guys take a moment for yourselves. What is one of those non-competitive moments that you guys might have to just say, hey, this is just us and we're just going to enjoy this moment for ourselves?
Oh my gosh. It's hard to think of one because Denise is so ultra competitive. I can't even play. It's not me. I mean, I'm super competitive on the field and when I'm coaching and all that. And when we're, maybe we're playing whatever, but pick up games. But I mean, Denise, it's cards. It's, I could be anything. She's like, let's compete. Let's have a win or a loser. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And her family is the same way. Like her brother's in town because he wanted to come in and see her first game. And he came to our game. But I'm like obviously known him for a long time now. And he's the same way. Like their whole family is like, hey, you want to play? I'm like, hey, you want to play cards? Yeah. What's at stake? What's on the line? What are we playing for? I'm like, my gosh, you guys never have an off switch. But I think what Denise and I do really well together is we vacation well together, really well. We go to some really cool places. We're very outdoorsy, adventurous people. Mm-hmm. And I think we really enjoy those moments together. That's kind of our way to kind of break from the stress of being a coach. And it's stressful, as I'm sure you can attest, but it being a head coach and, me here and her and now with the pro team, it's stressful environment, especially because we're both so competitive and we set such high expectations for ourselves. It can wear on you because you never really give yourself a break. And obviously after the FSU game, even though I was pleased with a lot of the stuff we did, we still lost. And it kept me up at night because I'm like, what can I do better? I need to be better at this. What can our staff do better? So, I mean, she's the same way. You lose and you really want to, you kind of beat yourself up. Where did I fall short? Where did our staff fall short? And you just you kind of want it so much for your players that it's hard to kind of let go of those moments when things don't go the way you want them to.
Yep. No, listen, I can relate as well because in the media, it's so I run my entire company and it's tough to wear many hats because you know exactly what you want to do and the product placement and everything else. And even last night, watching the third match of the evening of the season so far, and then doing a live show at the same time, as I'm leaning over in front of my camera to see the bigger TV studio so I can see what you guys were doing out on the pitch. It's funny because, yes, it's you have all these things that you want to do. If you end up having a bad show, I will tell you myself, it drives you bananas if something goes wrong. So yeah. I can definitely relate because you always want to put the best foot forward. But and thank God to my wife who just keeps me calm because there's times where it becomes overbearing, but she lets me know hey, slow it down a little bit, breathe, and everything will be just fine. But the funny part is you guys said when you vacation well together, so does the competition stop? I'm just going to use a cruise, for example. So you guys are getting ready to go on to the cruise ship. Does the competition stop there and then vacation and picks up afterwards? Or does that competition still go even during the vacation?
On the cruise ship, I feel like it still goes because it's we've only done a couple cruises together. We're not big cruise ship people, but you're you're on this boat, right? For the most part. So yeah, I think we're with friends. If we're with friends, Denise will turn it into a competition. If it's just her and I, and it's just the two of us, then it's way more relaxed. And we're just about, hey, let's just, spend this time together and enjoy each other in the moment. But yeah, I mean, of course, if there's extra people there, then Denise is all right, let's play. Let's let's have a competition for something. Cards, dice. I mean, pickleball on the ship, whatever it is. She's wanting to, be the winner, and that's what I love about her. And that's why she is as good at what she does as she is, because she's got this competitive drive in her that just is relentless.
Yeah, you can see it. Like I said, you can see the competitive nature with both of you guys. Even if I'm just someone on the sideline and I can see exactly what's going on, or sitting inside the stadium itself, or walking around, there's certain people that you can just kind of feel that aura, that vibe, like, wow, they're competitive. But it's a good thing to have, because it's always great. Because if we were just ho hum, we wouldn't be anywhere. Then we would just be, doing stuff that we love to do, but not, at a challenging pace. So I get it and I understand it. And Coach, good luck as we'll continue to have conversations. I can't wait for the next one here, especially for the next match, to see what happens. But thank you so much for taking the time away from practice to come on with me today.
Angel, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
No problem, Coach. Thank you.
All right.
Hello.
Hello, señorita. ¿Cómo está?
Muy bien. ¿Y tú?
Bien, gracias. So I'm going to do this differently here with
English?
Huh?
Are you going to speak in English?
No, we're going to do a little combination of both. So both audiences here. So for those who don't know, our goalkeeper here for USF, very unique, because not only did she come from the other side of the world, so we like to say the other side of the pond for those here in the United States, or from España, but it's rare that you get a goalkeeper, not only with the competitive fire spirit as an athlete, but those who know the Latin community, we have a whole different type of fire inside of us. So, señorita Galak, I want to make sure que si lo digo, si no lo estoy diciendo bien, perdóname, porque es diferente para nosotros. Los puertorriqueños, ustedes son de España, pero gracias por estando conmigo hoy.
Gracias a ti. Es un placer tener esta oportunidad y poder recibir una entrevista. Es siempre una buena señal.
Sí, no, como siempre. Y hoy, el primer juego ustedes tenían, ¿verdad? Porque es diferente. Cuando uno viene a jugar, siempre está el corazón, uno bien sabe lo que uno quiere hacer. Ahora, cuando estaba hablando ahí con el coach, el primer gol que tú dijiste que pasó en FSU no fue tan grande. Son cosas que uno, en la mente de uno sabe que uno quiere hacer, pero el segundo fue algo más que un error chiquito. Pero yo vi que tenía el fuego como eso pasó, pues no entiendo. Pero son las cosas que pasan. Para la gente que no vieron el juego, ¿cómo te sentiste? O sea, que no fueron unos cuantos minutos entre los dos, pero ¿cómo se sentiste el segunda vez que te pasó al lado?
Pues después del segundo gol, claro, eso fue al final, fue un error de comunicación, de no hablarnos, de yo querer anticipar la jugada y que Georgia, la defender, le dio con la cabeza y yo no me esperaba que ella fuese a llegar. Entonces yo empecé ya mi carrera hacia adelante porque la striker era muy rápida. Entonces yo ya empecé la carrera y cuando veo que ella le remata, ya estoy muy fuera para poder cogerla con la mano. Entonces me toca correr hacia atrás y como siempre es más difícil correr hacia atrás que hacia adelante. Entonces intenté luchar y llegar a bloquear el balón, pero no pude. Y me sentí como... Estamos jugando contra el número 1 del país y estos errores no pueden suceder. O sea, no pueden suceder en cualquier otro momento, pero es que ellos van a they're going to take advantage of it.
No, eso sí, es porque ellos saben. O sea, como el primer juego, y yo vi la entrevista que hicieron con el coach, que él dijo que el primer juego, pues, era grande. O sea, había bastante gente ahí, mucha gente que vinieron de FSU, y me ponía un poquito loco, porque
muchos stands.
Sí, entonces, como nosotros, viendo el juego, y nosotros también lo que reportan en el juego, es diferente porque tú escuchan lo que dicen la otra persona. Ahora, y nadie está diciendo nada malo. O sea, por uno dice, aquí estamos nosotros ganamos con este equipo el año pasado, no es tanto, aquí vamos a ganar otra vez. Pero el otro lado que fue USF, los muchachos y las señoras estaban escuchando eso. Ustedes se creen que van a ganar, que nosotros vamos a ver lo que pasa aquí en la cuarta, pero podía ser más peor. Voy a decirle eso, podía ser más peor, pero ustedes se vieron buenos. Puede ser que perdieron por 5. Bueno, si lo estoy diciendo bien, lo que nosotros vimos, lo que estaba pasando ahí, ustedes vieron más mejor lo que estaba diciendo Sai en el scoreboard. Los 5 a mí no me importó, porque lo que tú estabas haciendo y como tú estabas jugando, a mí es más importante viendo lo que pasó ahora en la segunda marcha y también la tercera también. So, yendo para atrás por el primero, después que se acabó todito, ¿cómo te sentías después que se acabó el juego y entonces llegando al segundo juego?
Pues, o sea, como tú bien has dicho, no es más, o sea, no es que nosotros como USF y toda la gente que nos conoce viera que no fue o sea, no era merecedor de 5-0, como bien ha dicho también el coach. No es que solo vimos que podíamos ser superiores o que podríamos hacer daño, sino que lo sentimos. O sea, al menos esa energía en el equipo, la previa de antes de empezar a jugar en el locker room, cómo estábamos todos animadas, teníamos ganas de jugarle. Al final es un challenge, al final lo tomas como el número 1. O sea, vamos a por todo. Y de hecho eso se sintió entre el equipo y teníamos todas muchas esperanzas. Hablaba con muchas, sí, o sea, vamos a ganar, estábamos todas animadas. Y transicionando hacia el segundo, fue ¿qué podemos aprender del primer partido?
Sí.
Para trasladarlo y que no vuelva a pasar. O sea, ¿cómo puedo yo trabajar para igual estar en el primer gol, que fue un cross, pero al final fue dentro? ¿Cómo puedo yo posicionarme mejor para evitarlo? ¿O cómo puedo pues, comunicarme mejor con mi compañera defender para evitar que vuelva a pasar lo mismo? Al final siempre es extraer todo de lo que podemos aprender y reforzar lo que hemos hecho bien.
No, eso sí, y tú estás hablando de energía, ¿verdad? Porque eso para nosotros es todo grande, porque si tú vienes con tanta energía por todo el mundo y tú dices, no, nosotros vamos a ganar hoy, y es más que una persona, y tú bien sabes que viene una persona y te dice, es que no lo siento hoy, yo no creo que voy a jugar lo máximo que puedo jugar. O sea, pues uno quiere cambiar la idea, o sea, el momento que la persona diciendo, no, mira que esto va a estar de lo más bien, nosotros vamos a seguir jugando de lo más chévere y vamos a estar bien. Y como digo, la primera cuarta, o sea, el primero no fue, puede ser toda la energía buena, pero la gente que vieron pueden decir, bueno, no sé si tenían la buena energía, puede ser que maybe que no estaban listos para el juego, cualquier cosa. Lo lindo fue, al final, la energía que tuviste, la persona que se quedaron y estaban con nosotros, dijeron, no, o sea, tenían buena energía, se vieron bien, pero no era el día de ellos. Entonces, con ustedes, porque la señora es diferente, yo tengo mi hermana, entonces mi hermana y yo, y hacen años y años que estamos juntos. Pero algunas veces, si no estoy, puede ser una semana que no esté tan bien, entonces yo la llamo y le digo, oye, Lucy, ¿qué me puedes decir hoy? Algo diferente que maybe que pasó en tu vida, algo que pasó, entonces me hace reír. O sea, pues lo más mejor que uno puede hacer. Hay una persona que tú puedes llamar en su familia o ahí con el equipo que tú estás, con la otra señora también. Cuando ustedes tienen una persona, un día que no es tan bueno, ¿cuál es la persona que tú le gusta coger el teléfono, si no mandarle un texto y decirle, mira, hoy no me siento bien feliz, pero ¿qué me puede decir para cambiarle, o sea, el idioma y el día de hoy?
Principalmente mi mamá, yo diría. O sea, tengo más gente, pero mi madre confía ciegamente en mí y más que nada lo veo como, porque ella no es como muy fan del fútbol.
Ajá.
Entonces, bueno, soccer, pero no es fan del soccer. Entonces ella como al sacarle el contexto del soccer como que le quita presión, no está hablando todo el rato, claro, yo me paso todo el día aquí, training, lift, todo es aquí. Entonces
Sí.
como que al hablar con ella es como que ya viajo a casa y ella me puede dar otro punto de vista diferente de alguien que no sabe. Entonces muchas veces necesito eso, alguien que no, que yo pueda release.
Sí.
¿Entiendes? Sí.
Sí, no, es verdad. And for those who are listening in, I always have this long running joke that I say, if you want to listen to the version in English, you press 1. Obviously, you can't. But it's one of those things that I just like to have fun with it. And it's funny because people would actually look on their phone and they're hitting 1. I'm like, it's a joke, folks. Relax a little bit. But for those to get everybody caught up, as I'm speaking here with I will say our best goalkeeper here for USF, we've been talking about energy on the field. When you have a good game versus a bad game, who do you call? And she was talking about calling her mom. And thankfully, my mom she's alive still to this day as well, along with my grandmother. God bless her, 92 years old, losing her vision, but she's around, which is a good thing. But my grandmother back in the day, oh my God, when I went to high school, just to kind of give you a little bit of background here, she was going through her menopause. So my grandmother back in the day, when she was going through it, it was a little tough. So you asked her for advice, she would give you the advice probably that you didn't want to hear, but she gave you that Spanish, spicy advice to tell you, here's what you're going to do. And that's it. So it was a quick 30-second wrap up, and that was all. But having fun here with our goalkeeper, with Señorita Calacas, I like to call her as well here on the show. But we mentioned about, the first match, how things happened, the trickled goal that ended up going through. And like you said, it was just a miscommunication. We all saw it out there in the field. And just to kind of send it over to our English-speaking friends here for a little bit. Yesterday, you guys put on a great product out on the field. As I mentioned to Coach, 5-0, it's not easy. And defensively, for you, the stop goals were, I would say, close to immaculate. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the focus of attention, what you can see if you were out live on the field, as far as in the stands, or if you were watching on TV, the same way I was watching the stream, you can see the confidence level is building back to where we erased what happened match number 1. We got better with match number 2. And then yesterday, you get your, for all intents and purposes, for those who don't follow the exact soccer terms, a shutout, as a lot of people here in baseball and other places as well. Yesterday's match being the third one, and obviously the conditions probably could have been worse. It did rain, so the ball will travel differently on the pitch there. How did you feel compared to game 1 or match 1, up to match number 3? The confidence that you feel now coming in, and obviously the coaching staff helping you along the way. And like you said, the miscommunications, which I could see personally because I was down by your end in the first match. That level of frustration sometimes can overcome the way you feel. And naturally, because we're all competitive, it's like the way how we like to say it. When that happened, going back to match number 1, and then last night, as you can see the progress that you've had in a short amount of time, how much of a takeaway have you learned since, okay, miscommunication, no big deal. We washed away match number 1 and we've gotten better to the next matches. So how do you feel now as far as your confidence in your skill set now being at match number 3 and that 5-0 shutout last night?
I mean, I've been working for a long time in the frustration part because as a goalkeeper, you need to forget the mistake or whatever happened in the field. Like a field player is the same, but I will say the goalkeeper position is more mentally focused. So you really have to learn how to move those thoughts, and then take away the things that you could have done better instead of talking as a negative thoughts to yourself, because that makes it worse. That makes your body tight. That makes your performance to be less precise. So, and then I would say coming through the second and third match, we've also at practice, we've done things with the goalkeeper coach and stuff that made us improve and be more confident, because you're not gonna do something different in a game if you don't practice it before, magically. Yeah. So I think that build has helped us too, and also it was different, the presses. So you of course you have to focus on your team and on what you have, but it's really important the other side as well. It's not the same an FSU that's pressing that is claustrophobic almost. You cannot even play. You need to be so aware your positioning, the speed, instead of a mid block that doesn't press as much. So in that way, you have to look better. Where are your defenders? Where's everyone? Communicate and be aware, but you get less possession on your feet as a goalkeeper.
Now, minus Coach Brown and his assistant coaches that are with you, obviously through the training facilities, training practices to get you guys, a good product out there on the pitch. Is there something that you do personally, in away from the practice field, let's just say, for example, in the practice pitch. But taken away from there, is there something mentally that you like to prepare yourself for, whether you're going into training, whether it's going to practice, or we're going into the match? Is there something that you like to focus upon that helps you become a better goalkeeper?
Yes, definitely. So I would say like 3 things. One of them is like your journalism. Like I do it every day, but I do one like main focused on the games. It's more like how do you feel? What's your purpose? What's your goal and stuff? And I write it down. And then the second one, I visualize or meditate, one of both. And the third one that I implemented this semester is going to Dr. Lee, the mental health coach in here at USF. Now we have 2, but he was the one that was before. And so we're working on that. And I think like that weekly visit or stuff makes me, like feel better or make myself like try to find my peak performance as I go into the field, into the weight room. I also take care of the mental part.
No, and that's important because again, if you're not focused, and we hear a lot of people, a lot of times they'll say like, oh, I went to talk to a mental health coach or I went to a mental health specialist. And for everybody, it's completely different. For some people, they might use it as a crutch, meaning like it's an excuse on why they've been performing really bad, whether it's in life, their health, something else. Because life, if you look at it, life is about choices. When we wake up in the morning, right, we choose to have a good day or a bad day. We can sometimes the dumbest things. We can go order a coffee somewhere and we knock the coffee over, like, that's it. It's a bad day. And it's not, but it's the natural way, the way we feel. But a lot of times when people have, when you're able to share and express yourself, like I'm pretty sure you have a friend or somebody that the expression that you have and you can talk to that person is different compared to like a parent or someone who's a little bit closer. Or even like you might be able to share something with Coach Brown that might be something different from your closest friend. But the mental health aspect of things, and we saw it during the Olympics, Simone Biles, she talked about, she brought her mental health coach with her because it made her focus just a little bit more to kind of drown out everything else that you're hearing. Because you guys being on, my generation is completely different. We didn't have internet. We didn't have social media. It was a newspaper. So if you had, let's just say, a great or a bad game, the only way I knew about it was the next day when I would see it on the newspaper. And then eventually as, TV evolved and we started seeing sports and it was different. But to take out, because we all know everything is tough, right? Sometimes we can have the easiest, smooth day and like, wow, today was awesome, but tomorrow's another day. So we forget about what happens. The good thing is, as you mentioned, it is good to talk to someone at least about how you're feeling, your expressions, even if it's not personal, because it's a part of your gameplay and how you come across. I think a lot of folks, if they had that moment to themselves to kind of really think like, okay, when I woke up this morning, what are my goals? What do I need to get done? And if they need that mental health coach or someone to speak to, it's always good because at least you have someone else to be listening in and have an opinion to say, you know what, here's, bring me your problem or let me hear what you got to say. And then they give you back good feedback to let you know, it's not going to be as bad as you think. But a lot of folks too, at the same time, and a lot of athletes for some reason are afraid of talking to someone in even if it's not in the athletic community, it could be something that could be a psychiatrist. A lot of them are afraid because now they feel like, oh, this person is going to know that I'm talking to a mental health coach and they're going to put it all over social media. And now all this negative stuff is coming. As an athlete, should someone be afraid to let, their fans know like, hey, listen, I speak to this person because they make me feel good and they give me good advice?
No, I don't think there's any relation to be like my life, my personal life, like individually, I wake up, like you said, everything's about choices. And I do believe that also is your choice about how are you going to react to things. So like to everything, to like a comment of someone, to like a goal, to like a mistake, is how you react to it. It's your choice. So that makes your energy go towards one part or another. And I don't think there's a relation between going to a mental health coach or another psychologist and like being afraid of it. Because as I said, personally, like perfect. Like I feel really good, and it's just that I want to try to find a way to get myself into a highest place, into a deepest point into my soccer career. So is there's a relation in the society of going to a psychologist, you're like you're mentally sick, or you have problems, or you have mental issues.
Right.
There's not a relation. I don't have mental issues, and I still going to perform better. So like I don't think people should be afraid.
No, you're right. Bueno, señorita Carolak, muchas gracias por su tiempo.
Muchas gracias a ti.
See, and thank you, as I was saying to our young goalkeeper here, thank you very much for our time, the junior here, USF goalie, and we can't wait to see what happens with match number 4, but thank you for your time. We do appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Of course, thank you so much. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen with game number 4. We're going to win number 5 as well, and all the way.
Nice. That's the way to think about it. That's a good feeling. Yeah. I believe the same things, so don't feel bad. That's why I'm wearing my green shirt to wear, for USF today. So yeah, it's definitely gonna be a great season. But thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Gracias.
Bueno, hasta luego.
Okay. Now the good thing was with the great conversation with Coach Brown, with Señorita Carolak, it was such a fun time. They have such great energy, and you can hear Coach Brown talked about it, and you can see. For those we're fortunate enough last week to cover the Tampa Bay Sun Football Club, the great thing was he mentioned about his wife and the competitive spirit that they have. You could hear it in Coach Brown's post-game conference, where she had talked about the competitive nature about her team, how they prepare for things, and no different. You can tell that these two have been together for 25 years, and I'm not even talking about as far as their marriage. How they work well with each other, 17 years together at USF. And then now he takes over for the USF women's program. She takes over now, first year, inaugural year for the Tampa Bay Sun Football Club. And you can see naturally the chemistry in between both. Same way with the goalkeeper, as you guys have heard in Spanish here. And I try to, as much as I possibly could, to repeat it back in English so you guys can follow along with what goes on. But there'll be more conversations this season coming up with USF Women's Soccer Club. And thanks to Chad for putting it together for me. I do appreciate his time, especially for both Coach and for Señorita Carolak to come off the practice field to be able to come out and have a moment to speak with me. So there'll be more and more coverage coming up this season with USF. I'm super excited about it. Hopefully we'll get some as well with the Tampa Bay Sun so you guys can follow along as the season progresses. But it was such a great time. I'm thankful to be able to work with such an excellent group, especially with USF. You guys know I've had a relationship with BJ Daniels, and we had a conversation with him and I as well. You can find it over on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, thegame.com, Sports Radio SR 102.9 thegame.com. And you can look under USF tab there, and you'll see the conversation between myself and BJ Daniels, who's now moved on with the Carolina Panthers, has become the quarterbacks coach out there with Carolina. So it's going to be fun to see what he's going to end up doing. But again, a great time with both from the USF Athletics Department. I can't thank him enough for the time that he spent with me. And again, more stuff coming up. Hopefully next week, you guys will be able to hear another live show here on as far as when it comes to USF and the match that they have, as they have more and more to come this upcoming season. And not to even include, we still got volleyball that's coming up, lacrosse that's coming up, basketball that's coming up. So if you guys have not visited campus, please do us a favor. Purchase your tickets, watch the women's soccer team, because they put out such a great energy out there on the pitch. So did the men. They came up a little bit short last night, 4-1. But again, that's just match number 1. Match number 2 will get a lot better. So thank you all once again for tuning in live to Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game. Not only on the digital sports app, don't forget you can download the app over on the website, SR1029thegame.com. As Gas Pump Guy says, great show today, Angel. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share stuff about the Bucs. And yes, Gas Pump Guy will be with me every single week throughout the NFL season, as he will give you the opportunity of listening to his report as well. And this is why I've created this network, is to give people an opportunity to showcase their talent and to share with everyone just all the goodness, not only here in Florida, but everywhere around the world. You guys hear Pete Shepard talking about it. We are in I'm not kidding about this, France, Germany, India, Vietnam. We are listened to everywhere around the world, not even including here on the social medias, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, obviously Amazon, on X, on YouTube, on Rumble. We are just everywhere, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to entertain you guys. And don't forget that coming up later on this afternoon will be my Hermano Rich Q, The Drive with Q from 3 to 5 p.m. But we hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic weekend. Whatever you do, make sure you stay safe. Take care of one another. And as you heard Senorita Galak talk about when it comes to mental health, that you go out there and take care of yourself, because that is vitally important as we all continue to grow and be with one another. So thank you all for tuning in. We do appreciate it. I can't thank, once again, Chad enough from USF, and to all my guests along earlier with Larry Schechter that was on with us. He will have the post up there with his book, so you guys can purchase as well. It's a great read. You will love, absolutely love this book, and the reviews do not lie, as he mentioned to us on air as well. So thank you all. Have an enjoyable, a fun weekend. Be safe, and whatever you do, we will see you back here on Monday, starting off with the Pete Shepard Show, 7 to 10 a.m., followed by Martinez coming from 10 to 12. And again, 3 to 5, The Drive with Q, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Pete is on Monday through Friday. So have yourselves a phenomenal weekend. Don't forget to watch the matches with USF. And don't forget, too, to support the women over at the Tampa Bay Sun Football Club, as the game, I don't believe, is sold out yet, but I will let you guys know throughout the socials if it is or not. Purchase your tickets. Sold out crowd. We hope to have another sold out crowd coming up again this weekend. And if you happen to see me over at Riverfront Stadium, stop and say hello, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to be stopping a couple people just to see how they're enjoying the newest product from USL Super League. And thanks to Amanda Vandervoort for putting such a great league together. So thank you all. Enjoy your weekend. We will talk to you back on Monday. Have a great day.